Creativity is you're always incorporating, you're always moving forward. I like to use the term called imua ikamana'o, right? Forward the mind. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Aloha, mai kako, and welcome to our talk story where we will be discussing contemporary Hawaiian mo'olelo here at UH Manoa. It's my pleasure to welcome Joe Balaz with us here today. So Joe is from Wahiawa, Oahu. He is an Oiwi poet and editor of this brilliant book, Pigeon Eye, as well as Ho'omanoa, 13 miles from Cleveland, the brilliant poetry album Electric Laulau, and After the Drought, all written in Pidgin and English. He also creates concrete poetry and visual art. He has been away from Hawaii for nearly 20 years now, so this is his poetic return to our islands. We really missed you, Joe.
Well, obviously it's nice to be back because of the time that I was gone, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, aloha nui and welcome back.
Aloha no.
I am Brandy McDougall, as I mentioned before, and I'm from A'apueo, Maui, now living in Kalaipohaku here on Oahu. I am a kumu in the American Studies Department where I teach Indigenous Studies, and I am the current Hawaii Poet Laureate. I'm joined by my dear friend, Ku'aloha Ho'omanawanui of Wailua Nui Aho Ano Kauai, a poet, scholar, and aloha aina, who is also professor of Hawaiian literature in the English department here at UH Manoa, who lives in He'eia, Kane'ohe, Oahu. So, wanted to start off first, Joe, with asking you, when did you first start writing? You know, who or what first inspired you? Is there a time, you know, in your life that you can think of where writing became particularly important, or did it just come gradually to you?
Well, my earliest recollection of writing something is when I was a kid, maybe about 7, 8 years old. And, you know, I had to do chores in the yard before I got permission to go out and play. So I had to do a lot of weeding, a lot of picking up tea leaves, dry tea leaves and all that kind of stuff. And then I used to have, you know, back in the day, a transistor radio, right? And then my father was very cool. He got this big battery, right? Because I guess he really wanted me to do some yard work, right? So he attached it to the back of the battery, and then really I would listen to the pop station or the popular music at the time. And I can recall, I don't know what the song was, but then, you know, you hear the song and then the melody. And then I can remember, this is going to sound so lame, but it's the earliest recollection of me actually changing the lyrics and then writing something to the melody of the thing. And then, you know, so the onset of being a male kind of started at 8 because on some level I already recognized the opposite sex, right? There are 2 examples right here. And so I remember singing something, oh, she's my queen, my queen, my queenie, and then that kind of stuff. But then you got to realize it's coming from the perspective and the mind of an 8-year-old boy. So that's my earliest recollection of writing. And then, you know, high school, you're exposed to stuff. Of course, you know, you have English lit in high school. And by about 16, though, I was already writing poetry. And then there's one story on an assignment. We had to write sonnets.
Oh, yeah.
And I had this very cool teacher. It's good to have very cool teachers. Don't you agree? You guys are teachers, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
We hope we're cool,
Yeah, we
teachers.
You're cool. Both of you are VCs. Very cool.
Mahalo, mahalo.
But anyway, I had an older English teacher. She was old at the time. She was actually an army nurse
Mm.
that went through World War I and Korea. So you can imagine what she saw, right? I graduated in 1970. So you know what was going on in 1970. The Vietnam War was going on. So now you're making me think of something. Like, I can imagine her teaching and looking at all the boys in the audience, because you had the draft back then, right?
Yeah.
And realizing that some of the boys that she's been teaching,
Yeah.
right? So on some level, she was thinking about that. So anyway, there was an assignment to write a sonnet. And you guys are teachers, you know, like, I remember a new student that wants to get experience, they put him in a public school with a teacher. She came from, what university was that? University of Hawaii. So I remember she was there, and the assignment was to write a sonnet. So I wrote a sonnet called Kingdoms of Fire.
Mm.
Right? And so they were quite impressed, right? So, you know, and then teachers, they recognize something, so they really encourage you, right? And when I went to high school, there was this level system. It's called WXYZ. The W class were the advanced students, then X and Y, and then Z. And then I was kind of in the Y class. And so she was impressed with the sonnet. But before that, here's another interesting story. The previous teacher that I had as a junior, she was a new teacher. And then the first assignment, you know, why don't you guys write about yourselves, right? And then, so I did that. And then later I kind of realized, like, you know, when you ask a student to write about themselves, you got to think, well, what am I going to write about? You're writing about yourself. And then I didn't think of it at the time, but you're really revealing your innermost thoughts, because you got to think of writing something.
Mm-hmm.
So later, I kind of got that stuck in my mind that, wow, I'm revealing myself to her, and then now she knows everything about me. So when I became a senior, and I found myself in the same Y class, I thought better. I thought maybe I'd be moved up to the X, right? So I was somewhat disappointed in that regard. And then she did the same thing. The experienced teacher said, why don't you write about yourself? What do you like? And then I don't remember verbatim what I said, but I said stuff like, I don't believe in anything. Like, and then there were a certain amount of questions she said they want you to answer. And then I don't know. So everything was like real negative. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah, you were real,
I know what you're up to.
Yeah.
I got experience. You want to know everything about me, so I'm going to tell you nothing.
Yeah, high school ku'e, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Teenage rebellion.
Oh. So, or maybe intuitive thinking. I saw this
Perhaps,
before.
yeah.
I saw this tactic before.
Yeah.
So unbeknownst to me, maybe it was next week or whatever, she came up in front of the class, and then she said, you know, in all my years of teaching, I've never had somebody answer an essay like this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share it with all of you. And then she shared it with her other classes, her W class too. And then she was reading all of my comments. So I'm like there, oh wow. But what she did, she was so cool, she didn't reveal who the student was. And then after that, I had a connection with her. You know what I mean? And here's another thing too. I'm in the lesser Y class. And then there was an exercise on Chaucer. She said, why don't you write about Chaucer, the whole class? And so I don't remember what I wrote, but she called me up and said, you know, Joseph, call me Joseph, this is very good. I'm going to use it in the W class too. So you see the incentive from the teacher.
Yeah.
And then by then I was encouraged on that level, and then I just continued to write.
That's so important, especially despite the fact, kind of being placed in these strange, tracked classes of WXYZ,
But then, the way
that
I
they
look,
still encouraged you.
exactly. I look at it that, well, that was an aspect to help me develop into the way I develop, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm on the edge of stuff.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point when we're young and we have a teacher that encourages us in a talent like writing, something we might not necessarily think about in that kind of way, and get us started on something that you had mentioned informally, right? Just being outside, kind of entertaining yourself. So aside from the wahine, what else inspires you to write?
That's a very heavy notion to write about. Think about rock music.
Oh, yeah.
I lost the love and feeling love. Oh, it's gone, gone, gone. Baby, baby, I'll get down on my knees. Yeah, see, who can't not relate to that kind of stuff? So you were saying the other things that influence?
Yeah, other things that might inspire you to write themes.
Anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think, well, this is just me. I don't speak for all poets, right? You're poets. I like to think of, well, if I had to give you something to grasp, I'd pull it out of my mind and give it to you. It's to, I'm like a sponge. So it's anything and everything. It can be music that I hear. I could be on a bus ride. Somebody might say something. There might be an argument. I might read somebody's poem. All of that. Because another thing, I never took any writing courses, and so my writing kind of developed on the periphery. And maybe it'll lead later into another question either one of you might ask. I kind of developed on my own a bit until I made my own outreach into the, quote, literary community in Hawaii at the time. And then the river keeps on moving.
I think that's very important, writing outside. I was very resistant. It's really funny being an English professor to taking any writing classes as well. And that idea of wanting to forge your own path and follow your own river, whatever that might be. A lot of people talk about, artists, including writers, about maybe certain times of the day or the season that they might be more inspired to write. Do you find that there's a certain time that you'll be working on something? Do you have a specific type of process when you're writing?
That's always a difficult question, the process thing. And then, a lot of writers, because I've heard it a lot, when you're hearing a canned response, right? Because it's difficult to really explain the thought process of what makes you create something. And then the way I create, you talked about like how teachers will influence you, and then when you're you got your own wings and you're doing your own thing, I'm not realizing that I'm doing my own thing. I just know that I enjoy writing poetry, and then I'm doing it. So I've never really analyzed my work a lot. I just have an innate sense of timing. I get ideas, and I'm always in the moment. I'm in the moment right now. And this conversation is in the moment, whatever we're going to say, right? So it's always been that way with me, and even with the different medias that I work with. Like sometimes I'll write a pidgin poem, and then I can have a concrete visual poem concept that, that would be cool to work on. And then I've also done music poetry. So it could be, there's no set pattern. I can remember being a younger writer in the late 70s and the early 80s. It's a classic, there's no the computers yet, which is great for a writer now. Talk about editing, right? Rapid editing. And my old typewriter. And here's another thing. My father had an old Underwood typewriter, the classic one. So my first poems that I wrote, like maybe at after high school at 18 or 19, were done on that typewriter. That's so cool. I had forgotten about that, but you made me remember. See, talk about being in the moment then and being in the moment now, right? I lost my train of thought, so you can bring me back. See, we are in the moment, right?
Yeah.
We're in the flow, and this
Always,
is improv,
always.
right?
Yeah.
That's very important. But I think one of the things that you're bringing up for people who want to be writers, poets, but maybe sometimes they feel that there has to be a special equipment or a special place. But you're basically saying that you're inspired by life and you can be anywhere in the moment and write what comes to you. And it could be as simple and as difficult as that at the same time.
Yeah, well, usually, well, for me, it's not difficult because I'm just going with the flow.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just writing what I'm going to write and then being creative, which is cathartic and fun, too, when you like doing it, right? But now you brought me back to the typewriter again. So at one time I can remember a classic writer thing. You've seen it in movies. Like, you know, I have to work. I'm not, you know, you guys have to work. And then it's amazing how much poetry and creativity we actually do when we have what we have to do to survive, right? So I can remember back then, you know, late 1970s, early 1980s, and I smoked at the time. I'm glad I quit. But working on a typewriter and then not being able to let it go. And then I found myself working on something, and rewriting. Unconsciously, you know, you're working on another level. You're into the poem. And the next thing I know, it looks like the sun is about to come up, and I gotta go to work. I've had a few experiences like that. For me, it can be writing anytime, but then, you know, there is something to, I heard it recently with a student that had said, oh, I think it was in your class, that had said that she likes to write in the early morning.
Oh, yes.
And then the great thing about that is, like, it's, you know, what she was saying too, and then I can attribute to her thought, everything is very quiet.
Yes.
And so I've written poems in that space, but for me, it's the whole gauntlet of the whole day. And then when you get a good idea, it could be any time. And you go with the flow. It sounds so simplistic, but then that is what it is. Right?
So your most recent book is Pigeon Eye, published by Ala Press in 2019. Okay, so this beautiful book here. You've been a champion of Pidgin literature and for Hawaiian literature in general from the outset. Your work is also lyrical with a strong kind of musicality and philosophical weaving that happens throughout, and weaving Hawaiian philosophy along with Buddhism and other kind of fields of deep thought. You use Pidgin to convey that deep and complex, these deep and complex concepts, right? What obstacles have you faced as a Pidgin writer and a Pidgin speaker, would you say?
None.
None?
It's because
That's great.
It's because I'm doing my own thing. Because I'm going to do what I do creatively, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I can switch from media. So, you know, I grew up speaking Pidgin. How can you not, growing up in Hawaii? And then we're bilingual, we're trilingual. You think about it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I speak a little bit of Hawaiian, elementary Hawaiian, and then I can speak Pidgin, and then I can speak American English, right? So creatively, and you got to realize, we got to backtrack on what I had said earlier. I didn't take any writing courses. I wasn't really part of the writing community while I was writing, doing my thing. So actually, my writing developed, wow, you're making me think of something. It's very cool. Outside of the normal literary happening that is happening at the time. And the only way I came into the literary thing that is happening at the time is that I was making outreaches.
Mm.
And I'll share a few outreaches that is kind of cool because the outreaches I made connected me with people that were very significant and then I still know to this day. I had saw a person named Richard Hamasaki. He doesn't look like the Richard Hamasaki you will see today. He was a young guy, just came to Hawaii. And there was an article about him in the newspaper that he had a new magazine called Seaweeds and Construction. So when I read that article, then I tracked him down because I was ready to see what's going on. And the cool thing about it is that he was a guy he was into the literary community, but in a way he was kind of on the edge too.
So that's how you also kind of met folks like Wayne Westlake, Imai Kalani Kalahele.
Imai Kalani Kalahele. Westlake was through Richard Hamasaki because he said, "Oh, I want you to meet a guy named Wayne Westlake." Oh, cool. He's Hawaiian. Oh, he's Hawaiian. Cool. And then to boot, later when I met him and we talked, he was a concrete poet also. And at that time, there weren't that many people in Hawaii doing concrete poetry. So that was cool. I met Imai, same outreach. He was part, at the time, he wasn't part of that group for long. It was called Halinawa. And there was an exhibit, I forget what gallery in downtown. And at the time, I had written a poem called Mo'o, which is in After the Drought. And so in the paper, this was so cool because they had the octopus, Almakua, they had the Honu. He had done a series, right? And then I saw a Mo'o. And because of the poem, I said, wow, who is this guy? So then I made the outreach. And then I've worked with Imai for years. So I met him at his house in Kali'i at the Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center, where he worked. And next thing you know, we're flowing along. The very first concrete poetry exhibit in Hawaii was in 1981. It was at the Prince Kohio Federal Building, which Wayne Westlake and Richard Hamasaki put together. And so I was part of that. So by then I knew Imai Kalani Kalahele. So I invited him down, and then that's how he met Richard and Wayne Westlake. And they went off on the avenue and they worked. All the people mentioned now, we worked with each other for a long time. The last influential person was a guy named John Dominus Holt.
Oh, yes.
And all of this happened in close proximity at the same time, which is so cool.
It was meant to be in that way.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah. You don't think so?
I just look at what happened.
Okay.
Okay, you see what I'm saying?
Different philosophies, I guess.
Yeah, well, being that I don't know, what do we know?
Yeah.
But then that could be a possibility. And then so I was working on a Moss Rock crew at one of the many jobs I did because I'm blue collar to the max, grassroots. And we had a job up at Pacific Heights. So the house there was there, and then I remember the lawn was kind of sloped. So we were making kind of an embankment wall, you know. And I remember the timing. Maybe you're right, it was meant to happen. Because I read an article about him in the paper again. See, 1, 2, 3, newspaper article. And I learned about these guys. And then I read about an article about him. I think they had put the picture of his short story book called Princess Night Rides.
Yeah, Princess
and
of the
also
Night
Waimea
Rides.
Summer.
Yeah.
So visually I saw the books, and then I saw his picture, which was a nice picture of John Dominus Holt. So I'm working, set in a rock, and this dude comes out of his house early in the morning with a cup of coffee. And I look up, and then he's surveying the work done on his property. That was John Dominus Holt. And so I go, oh wow, that's the writing dude I just saw. And by then I was already making these little chapbooks of poetry. And so I had something, that was physically there with text.
Mm-hmm.
And then my boss at the time, who was from Nanakuli, or maybe foreman would be a better term. He was talking with him, they seemed to have a good casual conversation. So when he came back, I said, hey, could you get me to meet that guy? I just read about him. And then he knew that I wrote poetry. So he said, oh, I'll go ask him. So I didn't see him ask him, but he said, and then we were still working on the job. So one morning he says, oh yeah, he said, yeah, because I explained that you write poetry. So the next day after work, I went into to his house, like, yeah, there's like this reception area. And it was real dramatic, like somebody was making a movie, right? So I came into this little waiting area and I'm looking around and I seen these huge calabashes in there. And there's a famous, I think it was on the Hawaiian dictionary with the gourd helmets.
Oh, yeah.
That classic.
Yes, yeah.
And
The
I look up on
kukui
the
Emerson.
wall and there's this oil painting.
Mm.
And that is the image. And then the palaua draped over all the big calabashes. And I'm going like, wow. I never seen calabashes that big. So I'm sitting there waiting for the arrival. And then he walks in. And we were lost in time. We connected on that level as writers, and then and then I had brought the thing because I knew I would meet him. No, it was probably the next
I mean,
day after
the
he
chat
took-
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was probably after the next day. He said, "Oh yeah, he'll meet you." I said, "Oh, okay, then I'll bring the chat book." And then I remember him sitting there. He says, "Looking at me." Oh, no, well, this is so profound, Joe. And after the drought, because he had Top Gallant Publishing at the time.
Right.
And he said, later on, I think he got in touch with me, and he said, well, maybe we can publish you. But it wasn't like right away. It was several years. And then that book was finally published. And then I lived in Punaluu at the time. And as fate would have it, his family still had the summer residence in
Yeah.
Punaluu.
Is that Kavela Bay, or is that further down?
No, in
That's right.
Punaluu.
Okay.
I think they used to have the Kawela Bay property, but then somebody told me they don't have it now.
Yeah.
So I don't know the story on
Interesting.
that. But I know his story called The Pool.
Mm.
He talks about that summer residence at Punaluu and also going to Kawela Bay,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
where they had the big family gatherings. So that's a good thing about writing too and poetry. A lot of our own personal life comes into what we write about. So I remember when the Ho'omana'o project came up, which was 4 years after the drought. After the drought was published in 1985, so it's 4 years until
Ho'omanoa.
Ho'omanoa. So I knew John Dominus all this time. So that's where I would meet with him to brainstorm on the anthology.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then he was nice enough to publish the anthology. It was kind of funny. He said there was other funding. He said I can't remember the guy's name. I think his first name was Kamaki. And then he said, "Oh, I want you to go see Kamaki," because he was saying like maybe you could get more funding. And then this is not a negative, but then when I went to meet this guy, I'm telling him what I'm going to do. I'm going to write and I'm going to edit an anthology of Hawaiian writing. And then he was kind of talking to me and says, oh, really? You're going to do that? And then so the vibe I was getting from him is, I think I'm not going to, on some intuitive level, I'm not going to get any action from this guy. And then it was kind of interesting because when I went to see John Dominus Hope again, he said, oh, what did Kamaki say? And then, so I don't know what dynamic both of those guys had. But then John Dominus Holt took the full thing unpublished in Ho'omanoa.
Oh, good. And thank goodness he did, because that's such an important
Absolutely.
publication that we
Yeah.
have, the first ever contemporary Hawaiian anthology of literature. Yeah.
You know, when I got to know him, because a lot of people that didn't know him that are younger writers, because he was older then, would look at him and think like, oh, he's so high makamaka. But he wasn't like that with me. And then actually, I remember Richard Hamasaki, Imai Kalani Kalahele, and Wayne Westlake, they had that thought about him. He said, wow, you're working with that guy? You know, I remember I went to some writing thing and he came up with a limo, he had his party. So they had this perception that this guy was that way.
Yeah.
I wonder if they even walked up to talk to him.
Yeah.
But I said, no, he's not like that. So it's kind of interesting. Later, he had published a little book of poetry, John Dominus Holt, which I wrote the back for. Imai did some of the art for it, and Richard wrote the intro to it. So we all actually, from me introducing them and said, no, he's not like that. And then when they got to know him, it was really great. So getting back to when I made my initial outreach into the literary community, it was like bingo. It was like, you know, hitting all the cherries on a slot machine. And all of those guys took me into the future. And I still know I met Richard the other night, and I met Imai the other night. John Dominus Holt, of course, passed away. But if he was alive today, I would have been meeting him too. So it's really cool in that respect.
You bring up a really important part of the history for contemporary Hawaiian literature, and a lot of the main players, and with Richard as well, literature of Hawaii outside of just the Hawaiian context. And it's almost the history and the stories behind what people see with the books published is so important. I've heard over the years now stories about John Dominus Holt. I was lucky enough to meet him before he passed away. Yeah, he and Peaches started a scholarship for Hawaiian Lit through Center for Hawaiian Studies with Hanani K. Trask back in the day and such. Imai has some amazing stories about John Dominus Holt as well. But one of the things that I kind of think I know who Kamaki is and what he represents with funding, but I really don't want to say because I'm not 100% guaranteed. However,
well, that's why it's good I forgot his last name.
Yeah,
So, but everything is cool. Everything is fine. That was the moment at that time. So everything is positive.
Yeah. But what is really interesting about that, because it takes me to the next question that I wanted to ask, is kind of along what Brandy had said about obstacles and challenges, not just as a writer, but as an editor and a publisher. Being an editor of OEV, Native Hawaiian Journal, we have come up against obstacles for funding with publication from very well-known established funders, particularly in the Hawaiian community, where the response is a little bit of puzzlement, going, Hawaiians aren't writers. We're oral performers, we're chanters. No, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
hula dancers.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so there's still this sense that it sounds like you got from Kamaki being a little puzzled as well when you approached
Possibly,
about funding.
you know, it can't be in his mind, but it's great that I had the second option.
Right.
And elaborate more on what you're going to say.
Well, this idea of some of the challenges as an editor, you know, you started...
My challenges?
Yeah, okay. You started, aside from being a writer, as an editor, you started your own press. I think it was Iron Bench.
Iron Bench Press.
And then was it Bench Press? Or am I
Iron Bench Press.
Iron
it was
Bench
kind
Press,
of a you know, tongue-in-cheek title. Yeah. I remember, I don't know who it was when they saw the title Ramrod of the magazine, right? And they said, oh, Ramrod, oh, Iron Bench Press, oh, real macho male Iron. I didn't think of that. I thought of a Ramrod as being forward thinking, right? And then, you know, it's very cool with the Ramrod thing. because Ramrod went 9 issues, and I had changed the title to Oahu Review for the 10th issue. But then I got artists to create a creature that had the ram's head for every issue. And then a very cool one was a guy named Shinichi Takahashi who worked with Richard Hamasaki. And he had the body, he had the triangle tattoos on one side and on the leg, and he had the ram's head, and then so it's very cool. So he turned the ram into a Hawaiian ram. You know what I'm saying? So that was interesting. Oh, here's the thing. I did have an issue with funding. I forgot about that. Ramrod was sort of like Seaweeds and Constructions at Richard Hamasaki. You just do it yourself. Right? But in my case, Ramrod was such a humble publication. It was more like a pamphlet. But I still did all the funding for that. And then, but then, by then, on a later issue, I think John Dominus Holt gave me a little money to kind of pay for the cost of that. But by then, we were already on to the thinking of the anthology. And to bring it to the one obstacle then on funding, maybe there were 2 with the guy that John Dominus Holt told me to see. But then this one is a clear-cut knowledge somewhat of that. Okay, I ran up against what you possibly had to run up a lot. My notion with Ramrod was to go 10 years and to create an anthology called Ramthology.
Oh.
And that was going to be the final product. So I remember, and then there was a guy that used to work for Bamboo Ridge, a guy named, I think you know, Dennis Kawaharada.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think he worked at Bamboo Ridge at one time, and then for whatever reason, he didn't work with them anymore. And then I think he created his own press
Yes.
too.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember, and I met him through Richard Hamasaki. I think Richard Hamasaki had a gathering when he did an early film called Circus. So he had a kind of viewing of it. I remember Dennis Kawaharada was there, so that's where I met him. So later, because the notion of putting an anthology together, and my thing was a one-time thing. And so Dennis actually helped to write the grant. He was kind enough to do that, because I don't know about grant writing, right? And then it was turned down. So it was turned down. And then, but at that time, the funding was going through another literary entity that was getting most of the funding. But that's not uncommon. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the music industry. You hear it a lot when you watch. This is why documentaries fascinate me so much. Is when music artists, they talk about the past and they reveal everything that happened. He says, well, you know, I was turned down here, but then Columbia picked me up, and then it turned out to be a better scene. Mm-hmm. There's so many cases of that, of people getting turned down. Yeah. But then in a way, it works out in a better way down the next avenue they go. And then conversely, there are people that I turned down, kill fight. And whatever could have been, you never know.
And so Ho'omanoa was such an important anthology in the time it came out, because it was almost a singular voice for Hawaiian poets at that time, around the 80s. Mid-'80s when I think it first came out.
It was published in 1989.
89,
but you know, I had already started working on it in 1987. Because there was an article with Richard was part of on the local scene of writing. So I forget who wrote that article. It was either in the Star Bulletin or the Honolulu Advertiser. Now you really know we're going back, right? And so there was like I remember they put the date that, that this dude, which was me, he's working on an anthology. So they had already kind of mentioned it by 1987 that an anthology was coming. It's just that it took 2 years until it finally came out.
It can definitely be a process. And I remember that as being so important and inspirational as an undergraduate student at UH when that had first come out. To see Hawaiian writers, I was sort of a closet aspiring writer at the time, you know, really kind of shame, like, to share anything. And so what are your thoughts, especially looking back now, on this time of really having a mostly silenced Hawaiian Oiwi voice in literature? I think literature overall has issues as well as music and other kinds of arts. But when you look back now to this period, that there were so few, right? And all the people you mentioned were involved in, even John Dominus Holt feeling the need that they had to start their own press because they weren't getting published at all. Right. And his essay collection on being Hawaiian, he starts off saying, I had, you know, this kept getting turned down by the powers that be.
It's good you brought that up because that was in the article too about John Dominus Holt. Yeah, that's great that you brought that up. You know, if you want me to look back over the landscape and then further into the future, hopefully, we don't know what kind of cards we're dealt, right? I wouldn't change a thing because it was what it was, and then that's so cool. So this is why movie makers, they have great ideas for scripts and movies, especially when they're dealing with an artist. Like, imagine somebody making a picture about Picasso. Or let's take a radical poet like Bukowski, and then actually a movie was made called Barfly, I think. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think he did a cameo in that too. So you know, I wouldn't change a thing. And to me, it's the journey of whatever the journey was, and then that's what makes it special. Even what we had to go through. If you're talking about what we had to go through to get more notice, then interestingly enough, it gives you, I never really thought of that. I didn't think of it that there were roadblocks ahead of me. I just thought, well, I'm doing my own thing. But by being creative and simply producing and just keep moving forward, imua, I like to use the term called imua ikamana'o, right? Forward the mind. Just keep doing what you're doing. As creative artists, a lot of creative artists, the film people here right now, creativity is, you're always incorporating, you're always moving forward. Such as the studio new technology, you're always creatively incorporating stuff. So for me, the journey is the thing, right? Isn't that the thing? Personally, and whether we join a group and we become part of a genre.
And it definitely inspired a lot of us from the next generation to maybe take up some of those challenges of publishing and get our work out there as well. Looking at what you and everyone you just mentioned and more, right? More poets and writers of that period that helped us feel that there definitely was an important voice that a lot of us could add to a longer literary conversation.
So it's like a relay race. You can imagine the unseen baton.
Yeah.
Right, you know, I had an opportunity to talk to some younger students, and then, you know, I kind of play acted it out. But this is how I approach people, creative people. When I was talking to them who are younger than I am, I kind of told them the only thing that separates me from you is that I had more steps to keep walking forward than you do. So when I look at a young writer, or any writer, it's always on an equal level, even if they're just starting out, because potentiality, who knows where they're gonna go, right? The next great Hawaiian novelist might be someone that you might be teaching, or you might be teaching, or someone that I just talked to, right?
Yes.
And it's the unseen baton, right, that's being handed off.
So
cool.
Joe, you're a brilliant concrete poet and visual artist. We're hoping to have you discuss a couple of your concrete poems today. So First, I think we're going to put up on the screen Waikiki. Could you share a little bit about what led you to create this piece called Waikiki?
Oh, Waikiki.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, first off, it's the obvious.
Yeah, it's Waikiki,
It's
which
the
is always, it's a
obvious.
perpetual problem since it was, you know, created in the present way that it is now. The original Ahupua'a of Waikiki was
Exactly.
beautiful
Oh,
and
yeah.
amazing and
Sort of like
abundant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much like Lahaina.
Yeah.
Lahaina. Yep.
Abundant natural resources that
Yeah.
were siphoned off and misappropriated and
Yes.
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah.
So you could say Waikiki is coming, you know, you have the obvious, and then you have the deeper things that I'm aware of, like you. So that's what came up, and then because I haven't looked at the piece for a while, that's why I thought I'd be looking at it so I can
Oh.
get. But I
Color
can
mine.
think. No. I think I split the like Kiki,
Yep.
Kiki,
Yep.
Kiki, right? And then I put a big Y in the circle where it's screaming.
And
like
there's
it-
a mouth, yeah,
there's a
screaming
mouth
in
like
the middle. Yeah.
reminds me of Rolling Stones album. And
Oh.
but you know, it's so central, and it's asking the question why,
Yeah.
and obviously we know why.
Yeah.
It's money, power, and I can do it because I can. And then it's the tourist industry that expands into the industry that it is.
And then your repetition of kiki means to spout, you know, and Waikiki means to spout water. But
There you go.
kiki, I take it or I read it as, you know, what is being spouted now? You know, it's money. You know, it's like tourism. It's what is being grown there now, which is something very different.
Well, you know, you brought up something too. You know, those are the obvious things too, which is cool. So you see, there's so much interpretation within the
Yeah.
concrete
Yeah.
piece, and it's almost like a concrete poem, and it is a concrete poem. Now that I think about it, see, you're making me okay.
It
so
is I thought
okay.
it always was a concrete
Yeah,
poem.
it is a concrete poem that has a Hawaiian deeper element
Yes.
to it, which
Yeah.
is kaona, the hidden
Yeah.
meaning.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the kiki, and then you have the question mark right
Yeah.
at the end, right?
Yeah.
So the question is continuous.
Mm.
What is Waikiki then? What is Waikiki now? What will the rest of Hawaii look like? So every island is going to have a Waikiki. I can't project the future.
Yeah.
So, wow. Gee, that piece was deeper than I thought then, right? Okay,
It always
very
is.
cool.
It always
It
is.
always is, especially when we look back at the hurricanes that ravaged Kauai, that not all of the tourism and the resorts have even come back. And so there's been this long-standing fight now to reclaim the Wailua Nui a Hoano Aina, of which Cocoa Palms Resort is built on and has been sitting as a destroyed property for over 30 years. And then with the most recent Lahaina fire still happening and unfolding with all of the devastation, that question about Waikiki, will it always stand? Will it always represent what it does? Because in these other areas, we're at a time where there's a lot of pushback to that, saying we're not okay with just going with that flow anymore.
Well, you know, let me jump on that because
Yeah, should
back-
it continue to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
Waikiki, right?
there was
Yeah.
a person here, she's in Kentucky right now, a person named Victoria Keith, which was, she was a trailblazer here.
filmmaker.
Filmmaker, very humble. But I gotta give her kudos because, you know, she was, you know, Sand Island, that was her
Yeah.
making that film. And then she made a film. I was in it only because she liked I don't know how she found out about this poem, but she liked this poem called Spearfisher. So I was in that movie. But most of
That's a
it's
beautiful
a
poem, yes.
documentary, and people are talking about how can we hold on to being Hawaiian, right? You watch that film today, it's 1987, and you realize it's the same issues now.
Yeah.
Now, in that film, I think it was on Kauai. I think there was a person that went to live in Alaska and to be with the indigenous people there. And then when she came back to Hawaii, she figured, well, how can I apply what I learned from there? And in that film, she's talking about we have to get a land base, right? Land base.
Yeah.
And I think with her segment, they were saving land in Haina side.
Yes.
Now I know, I've been away for 18 years, that Zuckerberg owns a whole lot of land on that side of the island. So without knowing, I'm kind of wondering, from all the families that made that effort, and in the film they were able to, to get that land. I wonder if that was the land that was, because with Zuckerberg, money is not an object. You just plop that down. I wonder how many people sold out. So he can go on his hydroplane surfboard and look back and, well, I own that whole stretch of coast, right? It is what it is, but let's address it, right? At least, and so. But maybe I'll do some investigation to see, oh, wow, did he really do that? So what I saw in the movie, all those issues, they have to, right? Which makes me think, what's going to happen in Lahaina? Because prices in Hawaii will never go down. And of course, some people will want to rebuild, but when somebody comes along and plops down money, they pick you off one by one.
That's what's so.
And will Lahaina become a new Waikiki? I don't know. Maybe they'll do, like there was an old theater in Haleiwa called Haleiwa Theater. They actually tore it down. Some people were trying to save it. It was a great theater, great little theater. And the people, here's the thing. This is an interesting illustration. The facade of the old Haleiwa Theater, when the building was put there that replaced it, they decided to put on that building the facade to kind of show, like, this is what was here. And guess what it was? You guys want to take a wild guess? It was a McDonald's.
Oh.
Which kind of speaks a lot, right?
Yes.
Just by, not that a Big Mac isn't a good thing to eat. It's just that if people had made more of an effort, and they could have.
Yeah.
They're talking about, and now I see signs, historic Haleiwa. Talk about historic. You had this historic building, like, if you could have saved, right?
Yeah.
So
There seems to be more awareness these days. I think the Mauna, the occupation of the Mauna against TMT has raised global awareness within the Hawaiian community as well. And we've also seen that natural catastrophes weigh in. Places, whether it's the volcano wiping out areas. My family from Puna is like, oh, Tutupele's cleaning house, right? It's not necessarily seen as just devastation.
No. To interrupt you and you get back to your thought, it's the Hawaiian concept. We know that that's rebirth.
Right.
Other people will look at it. And I'll give you a quick thing. I'm watching public television in Cleveland, and the film comes on. Destruction by Kilauea, right? And I'm going, no, but I know what it is, right? It's like, hey, you got to realize that you're living on an active volcano. So loss is terrible for people to lose something, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The Lahaina thing, a little bit different than that. Who would have expected that?
Yeah. And that idea connecting back to the ravages of colonialism, the theft of the water and the destruction of the original resources, I think when I think about writing as one small part, Hawaiian writers like yourself, writers, artists, musicians like you, Imai, Wayne Westlake, many, many others that have set in part at least some of the pohaku in that ahu of awareness, like the poem you read last night, about
Would
the
you like me to
mana'o
read
is
it?
a ahu.
That particular poem, how are we going with time?
That would be great. And actually, yeah, that would be a really beautiful way, I think, to close today's interview with you. Yeah.
Oh, so the time just flew, doesn't it?
It does. It always
Yeah,
does.
yeah. If you wouldn't mind sharing that, that would be really wonderful.
Should I do that
Yeah.
one or the
you
one
have
that I
you
just
have
wrote
so
today?
many amazing ones.
Yes.
You
really,
want that
Joe. Whichever one you
one.
think. Yeah.
I'll go with the one that you suggested then.
Okay.
This poem is called The Mana'o is One Ahu. When bones have seemingly been crushed into dust, and the spirits call out their names, stone to stone to stone, the Mana'o is one Ahu. Triangles rain down from the sky, while one double-hulled canoe glides upon the water. To one cloud bank in the distance, at the center of your na'au. Cascading flashes of insight, no like let you leave, as if the heart has found one landing in the presence of its own beat. Pahu drum joins the rhythm, pulsating like an intuitive kind of light that streaks through the mist. Hold fast, make another placement, add to the height, and build anew. When seabirds fly to greet you and guide you back to shore, cries on the wing going tell you, stone to stone to stone. The mana'o is one ahu. That was a good choice.
That was
Mahalo.
beautiful, Joe. Mahalo. Mahalo nui to everyone joining us. Once again, we're here with a true treasure of Hawaiian literature, Joe Balaz. I'm Brandy McDougall, and this is Dr. Ku'aloha Ho'omanawa Nui. Mahalo nui for joining us. Aloha, ahui ho.
Aloha no.